Hello, folks. On Monday, January 13th, I gave a talk at the Recovering from Religions X podcast live chat presentation thing. And it was great. It was a ton of fun. And the talk I gave, I put everything into it. I'm taking here one of my rehearsal recordings and I'm editing it up so that it's much like if you had been there in person. In fact, it may even be better because all my graphics work in this one. The magic of editing. I hope you enjoy this exclusive presentation of conspiracy theories, Christian nationalism, and you. Last year, we talked a bit about some of the similarities between the atheist community and the trans community. When Helen asked me to come back for another round, I wasn't sure what to talk about. There is no shortage of topics. The tricky part is, which one? In this age full of end-of-the-world drama on a zillion different fronts at once, which thing does an intersex transgender atheist minister running several nonprofits and a genetic research project while preparing to flee her home country to avoid death camps pick as the one thing to talk about? So why not all the things? Because if you mix together all the things I do into a single message, it's this. All the pseudoscience conspiracy theories that are making our world substantially worse are, when the Scooby-Doo kids pull off the masks, in fact, the same conspiracy theory, and it's Christian nationalism under that white hood. That is to say, they all make the same basic arguments using the same fallacies in the same way and for the same reason. Like related languages, the only thing different is the vocabulary. Whether you're talking about flat earth, young earth, gender criticals, anti-vaccine, 9/11 truthers, or anything else, they all work in exactly the same way. They provide no evidence for their own claims, but only pick at specific things from the predominant consensus under the fallacious assumption that if they can prove this one thing about the mainstream scientific view incorrect, their pet theory wins by default somehow. When Ken Tovind or Ken Ham tries to demonstrate why they think others should join their creationist religions, they point to things about evolution they don't understand, like whale evolution or endogenous retroviruses. They say these things can't really be real, and because those specific examples aren't real, the whole hypothesis of evolution must be junk. And therefore, the thing they believe has to be true. Never mind that what they've proposed as the only alternative in their false dichotomy includes a magic rib woman, talking snakes and donkeys, and a carpenter ghost who wants to live inside you. Clearly, if evolution isn't true, then creationism, their brand of culturally regressive young earth Christian creationism in particular, must be correct. The flat earthers do exactly the same thing. They say there are no photos from space. When you show them the photos, they say it must be CGI, just like the young earthers ignore the fossils that demonstrate whale evolution. All real evidence isn't material, because it isn't relevant to the real claim they're making but refuse to defend, that the Bible is true, full stop. It's weird those two groups point and laugh at each other so much because they're doing the same things. But the fundamental element that makes a conspiracy theory is the conspiracy. For flat earthers, it's that NASA and all the space agencies and their entire staffs are lying to everyone. For Satan! For young earthers, it's that all the geologists and evolutionary biologists and nuclear physicists and so forth are lying to everyone about the age of the Earth. For Satan!
If they can convince you that the Earth is 13 billion years old, it come out of the Big Bang, and we evolved from monkeys, there's no need for God.
For gender criticals, it's that the entirety of medical science, every physician in every specialty, along with all of biology, neurology, genetics, and a bunch of other disciplines, all of them are lying to everyone, but those blessed with the special knowledge, they know the secret truth. These examples are really obvious. Others are more subtle, but when you look, you see the same mechanisms under the hood. 9/11 truthers insist there's a conspiracy. The government is lying to everyone because the story of September 11th doesn't make sense to them. And all the evidence you might present to answer their specific complaints get brushed away for arbitrary reasons. That's because they don't care about the evidence or the truth. The conspiracy theory is just the outer shell. I got a couple of flat earthers to admit to this during a debate a couple of years ago. They say they believe flat earth because they believe the Bible. Period. Full stop.
The Bible talks about being immovable.
Because the Bible does teach a flat earth.
Whatever they have to do to justify it, they will do. Because as long as we're trying to convince them the earth isn't flat, we aren't talking about whether the Bible is true. That's what's called a Mott and Bailey. You're doing battle over the outer Mott, the thing the conspiracy theory claims to be about, but you can't ever change the person's mind because as soon as you nail them down on any one point, they retreat to the Bailey, the inner stronghold that isn't even anything to do with the conspiracy claims. It's always the Bible or some other equally held religious level conviction based solely on wishes and feels. They know they can't defend such a belief, so they protect it with barriers, like conspiracy theories. You can't beat the conspiracy theory because they have religious certainty, and you can't get at the religion because it's protected by the conspiracy. This is why we say you can't reason a person out of a position they didn't reason themselves into. Reason, evidence, and reality have no bearing on why they believe these things. For 9/11 truthers, the conspiracy behind it all is that the government is overrun by demons and Satanists who want to bring the USA down in order to demolish Christianity. Somehow. For some reason. Hail Satan? Like the young earthers with their just asking questions pseudo-skepticism about whale evolution, or the flat earthers with their insistence a level plane is all anyone has ever seen or measured. The truthers insist it's simply impossible a jet could bring down the Twin Towers or that a small group of terrorists could have been behind it. It must be a conspiracy. Therefore, demons in the halls of Congress. If you believe any of these ridiculous ideas, and you think any of the others are foolish, consider why you think those are foolish and apply the same criticism to the one that you do hold. Congratulations! You've taken your first steps to becoming a critical thinker. But because Bible isn't always an evidence, for gender criticals, the conspiracy they appeal to is a little murkier. They're a really new one, only arising with the latest moral panic around 2015, and they aren't all on the same page yet. Some of them point to Big Pharma and insist all the sciences are lying about trans people so a few corporations can grab a tiny bit of extra cash off the gender care services they offer anyway to cis people. Like Matt Walsh, J.K. Rowling, and Frank Turek. All cis, and all benefiting from gender-affirming care. Others point at trans women and say, that's not a genetically female person, and therefore the goal of the grand conspiracy is to erase females. Somehow, for some reason. If that sounds a lot like the anti-Semitic Great Replacement theory, you're correct. They copy-pasted that one so completely. There are even some conspiracists like Jennifer Billick and Helen Joyce who actually say that, quote, it's the Jews behind this great evil because they control everything. Who they blame varies, but at bottom, they all truly believe that every medical association on Earth is lying to everyone in service of the grand conspiracy. That doesn't just mirror the flat Earth claim that NASA is lying to everyone, it far exceeds it in scope and scale. To be blunt, the gender-critical conspiracy theory is even more ridiculous than flat Earth, and it's even more tightly bound to Christian nationalism. Even though Helen, other Helen, is an avowed atheist, she spreads her hateful pseudoscience and undermines Jewish people as much as gender and sexual minorities. She may not be Christian, but she's doing the work of Christian nationalists. And we can see it in the actions the hate groups take. The Southern Poverty Law Center, the organization dedicated to tracking the efforts of hate groups, has published the receipts about how all the anti-trans groups, from SEGEM to GenSpect to that imposter medical organization that was in the news recently, the American College of Pediatricians, more on them in a moment, they all share staff, resources, and funding. I'll give you 3 guesses where that staffing and funding is coming from, but you probably only need one. And you're right. Christian nationalist organizations. The SPLC has also put together a handy graph showing how all the pseudoscience organizations are linked one to the next. GenSpect shares staff with FAIR, which shares staff with the Heritage Foundation, all working on both Project 2025 and to oppose WPATH, the World Professional Association for Transgender Health, that is. The pseudoscience groups are in bed with the ADF, whom I don't have to tell anyone here is explicitly Christian nationalist, and they all work to help out the American College of Pediatricians, which was founded originally to oppose abortion rights, switched to opposing gay marriage and gay adoption, and now opposes trans people's health care. They still oppose those other things, but those issues don't bring in the funding like they used to, so they focus on the political hot button du jour. All of these organizations exist to do specific things, but the methods are all the same. Undermine human rights while claiming they're only doing it to protect another vulnerable group, which they're also actively harming. All of it is ultimately to serve the ends of an authoritarian takeover by way of Christian nationalism. That's what Project 2025 is, after all, the explicit plan for how to enact that goal in the United States. It's a little ironic that conspiracy theory pseudoscience fearmongers like the anti-trans groups are themselves part of an actual conspiracy, but since that nefarious undertaking is out in the open, maybe it doesn't count. Or perhaps, in this case, it's a smokescreen. They make accusations that liberal Jewish billionaires are manipulating the levers of power to destroy the Christian social order. That's on page 197 of Helen Joyce's book, by the way. They do that precisely because extremist billionaires supporting their misinformation really are spending billions to manipulate the levers of power. Maybe Projection 2025 would be a more accurate name. The point is that even this conspiracy outer fringe of the culture war is also operating in service, whether consciously or obliviously, to advance the ends of Christian nationalism. And lo, it is working. Countries where these groups have a foothold and influence are growing more right-wing, more reactionary, and more explicit about the religious reasons behind their blatant attempts to control people's lives and end autonomy. And this stuff gets insidious. Just a few weeks ago, the FFRF was parasitized into spreading this exact flavor of Christian nationalist nonsense, authored by another avowed atheist. I'm sure everyone here is familiar with that controversy and how FFRF realized that defending civil rights for all is critical to fighting against religious oppression. As much as it hurt the organization, I'm glad it happened because it made the situation crystal clear. putting a spotlight on the fact that just because a person is an atheist doesn't mean they believe anything else in particular. They aren't necessarily a skeptic. They aren't necessarily a humanist, or educated, or inclined to critical thinking, or understand empathy. They don't necessarily want to oppose Christian nationalism. Indeed, this past year, I myself had a run-in with the Atheists for Liberty organization, which are basically atheists who left the church, but not the dogma of how people ought to be forced to live. They no longer say, because the Bible says so, but they do still say so. And the Christian nationalists are happy to support them, because their work in turn supports the Christian nationalist cause. Atheists for Liberty, for example, always has a presence supporting the explicitly Christian nationalist organization Turning Point USA's events, and supports the same legislative efforts to eliminate bodily autonomy for women, for all GSM people, and for racial minorities that they do. So, the flat earther conspiracy theorists are open about being all about the Bible. The gender-critical conspiracy theory is being fueled by Christian nationalism for political power, much like the young Earth conspiracy theory was once used as a political wedge to try to undermine public education. And even though Kitzmiller versus Dover was years ago, that damage has a long half-life. Many schools in the US still effectively teach creation only, and even more teach both creation and evolution as broadly equally valid. One of the organizations continuing to promote the pseudoscience supporting that idea is the Discovery Institute, which a while back put out a statement called the Wedge Document. You can look it up later, but TLDR, the plan they published is to use creationism as a stepping stone toward the ultimate goal of establishing a theocracy in the United States. Thank goodness the fascists are inept enough to outright tell us what they're up to and leave the receipts lying around. Or maybe they're just confident people won't be convinced by the evidence, because their efforts to undermine critical thinking are working. There's a famous saying in skeptical circles: those who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities. It isn't just the overall intelligence and rational capabilities of the public at stake. That too, but this engineered increase in gullibility isn't just on purpose, it's being done for a purpose. Creationism isn't just keeping millions of adults from understanding evolution by having deprived them of a comprehensive science education as kids. It's also layering cement on the indoctrination they've been given that reinforces the idea that the Bible is true. And that's the actual point. Because if the Bible is true, then of course it's reasonable that demons are real. And if demons are real, then of course it's reasonable they've taken over the government. Why, it only stands to reason that the demons in charge want to make abortions accessible, or let gay people marry, or let trans people exist, or let black people be free, or let women vote. It's all a satanic effort to undermine God himself! And there it is. The Ur conspiracy. All the social progress we've made since the time of the Civil War is the work of Satan, and it must be undone. God says so. Through the politicians he's selected, of course. Just give them total control, and they'll fix everything. Wink. As I've noted in other places and other times, sure, there are people who don't care about any of this. They may even have strong opinions on the shape of the earth or what defines a woman that stand in opposition to literally all of science on those questions. They just want to be free to not have to go to church and be told how they have to live. For those people, I have to ask, what do you imagine secular advocacy is for? Here at RFR, the mission is to help people recover from the damage religion has inflicted on all of us, often as children, and to help reduce the damage religion will do to future generations. We can't do that if we get mired down in debate over whether certain kinds of people deserve human rights. It should be a given that all people do, because the alternative, that none of us do, is what we're fighting against. If you happen to think it's anti-intellectual to not allow the free exchange of ideas over whether trans people are real, consider whether you feel the same way about proposals that we should be spending time and energy discussing the shape of the earth, or its age, or whether demons really are running the US government. I'd hope you'd agree that would be ridiculous. Because it is. These are all the same conspiracy theory formula, all in service to Christian nationalism. If you think it's too woke to not even have the conversation over the legitimacy of trans people, first of all, weird that you think that conversation should happen here, but would you put the same weight to suggesting we should have the conversation about the Holocaust, race realism, whether women should continue to be allowed to vote, science being taught in schools, if there should even be schools? All of these questions are put forward by the same people and for the same reasons. To undermine history, to undermine our groups, to undermine science, to undermine trust in our own ability to reason. If you find yourself asking these questions, I really do wonder, what do you think secular advocacy is for? Why do we want to prevent a religious takeover of our society, if not to protect our right to live our lives as best we can from those who are intent on abusing religion to gain power? Conspiracy theories, even the silly ones, are dangerous. They undermine critical thinking, spread harmful misinformation, and prime people to buy into even more foolish ideologies. But more than that, they all serve the ends of the Christian nationalists whose number one goal is to strip everyone of personal autonomy. They don't want to just throw trans people into camps, or just deport everyone who isn't white, or just make all abortions illegal, or just eliminate public education, or just ban gay marriage and recriminalize homosexuality, or just make going to church mandatory. They're hell-bent on doing all of them, and much more besides. We have to stand against all of it, or we'll get all of it anyway. We see it happening right now. In the US states where trans rights are all but gone, they're proposing legislation to reverse gay rights, and many have already banned or restricted reproductive health care. Once they take away rights from one group, they move on to the next, all because of what some person tells them the God that nobody has ever seen wants. If you do agree that human rights are a fundamental issue to secular advocacy, if you do agree that truth matters, that reality matters, and that in the words of the famous religious leader, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., none of us are free until all of us are, then I congratulate you on following the premise of atheism as a political movement to its logical conclusion. Ultimately, this is about autonomy. This is about our right to live our own lives. Period. And it always has been. But even if you still think one race of people is genetically inferior, or you do think the Jewish question is a reasonable topic for debate, or you do think women aren't fit to have our own bank accounts, I'd hope you'd learn and grow and become a better person. But I'd still say it's in your own best interest to stand with us dirty atheists and push back against the Christian nationalists as hard as you can. Because it's your freedom at stake, too. Your ability to get free from and recover from religion. Thank you. Thank you so much for supporting me, for contributing to the Patreon, to channel membership, wherever you do, however you do. It means a lot. You guys helping makes it possible for me to spend any time doing YouTube stuff at all. And as the channel grows, maybe that'll make it possible to do more here and lose some of those extra jobs. I certainly hope so, because I love doing this stuff. But I do digress. Thank you so much for your support. Doodles!
Just like a spark that's breaking out, can't make